Live. Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
Hello.
hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, so here we are again. This is, ano ba tayo? This is our third,
Third.
right?
Third.
This is our third,
Our
yes.
third.
Senior moment again. Sorry, because I had general anesthesia when I was, so I
When
always
you were
forget
born.
things nowadays. Oh, yeah, yeah. So anyway, this is our third episode, and today we're going to talk about the significance of the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. And right now, in in the country and of course around the world, you will be a witness to a lot of virtual and even actual uh, ceremonies that commemorate the end of the Second World War, which is the actual event itself is the surrender ceremony on board the USS Missouri in which was conducted on September 2, 1945 at Tokyo Bay. So we had there MacArthur and the Allied High Command uh, accepting the surrender of the unconditional surrender of Imperial Japan, which was then led by a delegation of the Japanese foreign minister and a number of army and military imperial military officers. Um, ano yan? Uh, so today we will be not just be discussing the um, historical event itself. We will also talk about the efforts to commemorate the event, both especially here in the Philippines. Okay, and who are the people who are um, involved in it, and we are fortunate to have a very passionate advocate of World War II history here in the Philippines, of preserving the legacy of World War II history here in the Philippines. So without further ado, I would like to present our panel of speakers right now. So aside from me, Jose Antonio Custodio, I have here, or we have here, um, Mr. John Ray Ramos. Okay, up there you can find it. That's John Ray Ramos, who is a John Ray. Could you? Yeah, he is a cultural heritage historian. John Ray, what's a cultural heritage historian? What does that guy do? What do you do for a living? John Ray, are you still there?
Hello. Yeah.
Yes. So what's a
So,
cultural heritage historian?
okay. So, as a historian, my specialization is cultural heritage, meaning I work with multiple disciplines to engage in activities on heritage awareness, heritage conservation, and even heritage um, education. So, it can span from the prehistory to the contemporary history of the country.
So that must be, isn't that a heartbreaking thing to do in this country right now?
It's actually yes, it's a heartbreaking it's a heartbreaking ano, endeavor or field here in the
Yes,
country.
yes.
Demolition left and right.
Yes, I know
Okay.
that. And then, of course, it's also the forgetfulness of the people. Okay, you're trying to preserve culture, etc., and people just like his people tend to tune out of those things. One thing that practically floors me whenever I hear people go, isip tayo ng practical, no? So they think that historical preservation is not a practical thing to do. Then, of course, our next panel member is here is Mr. Philemon V. Elefante or Fil Elefante. And yes, Phil, you're a journalist.
Yes, I am a journalist. Right now, freelance
Yes,
because of the situation.
yes, and basically you're interested also in World War II history or
Yes,
military. What triggered that?
military.
What?
Well, my father was in the AFP, and once he brought me to the tank display in Baguio City, and after that, I was hooked. Then there was, of course, the the stuff about the stuff found on TV, and I found it fascinating. But what really got me into it was when I read a Lady Bird book on about Julius Caesar and Roman Britain, and that got me into world military history.
Ah,
And full circle, now I'm learning about Philippine military history.
okay, so thank you, Phil. And then our last but not the least is actually our special guest today, who is yes, okay, Des Benipayo. Okay, so and let's go to Des Benipayo. There you go, Desiree Benipayo, Dor Desiree and Kowa Benipayo, who is from the Philippine World War II Memorial Foundation. Des, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for inviting me, my friend.
Yes.
I'm Desiree Benipayo, VP for Research and Education of Philippine World War II Memorial Foundation. And we aim to bring World War II history to the schools, to our fellow Filipinos.
So what were the so right now before we go into the details of your activities of your foundation, let's first discuss what got you into getting
World War II.
interest into World War II history. I mean, if you look at all of us, there are three guys here. Okay, so I mean, I'm not going.
Yes.
I wouldn't like to go into that misogynist type of thing, but there are three guys. I mean, it's easy to uh, conclude that three guys like World War II history, but I mean, you,
For a girl, no?
uh, yeah, for a girl, then suddenly you are right in the thick of it. So what got?
Actually, it was my mom's stories.
Okay.
Yung storya kasi niyan, in December 1944. So my mom kept telling me about this story and it got me so interested. Bata pa ako. And I would even cry when she tells this story because it was so sad. So my lola gave birth in December 1944 to the youngest nila mami. So he's the sixth of six children, my uncle. And then at the time, my lola was nagkasakit siya eh. She wasn't getting well from I think the operation or whatever that that giving birth uh, when she gave birth. So my lolo at the time decided to go back to Malolos because my maternal side is Tiongson, the Tiongson from Malolos. And I'm proudly descended from the women of Malolos.
No.
So, bumalik sila ng
Wow.
Malolos. Yun yung kwento ng mom ko. And then when they got there, um, things were hard. They had to move also to their farm in San Luis, in Pampanga, which is nalaman ko, their farm is in Baliwag actually. Magka-border lang pala yon. Now lang I found out. So anyway, story
Mm.
ng mom ko was it was so hard. Tapos, they walked all the way from Manila to Malolos first. And my lolo made this homemade cart na nandun nakaupo yung lola ko. And all their belongings were there. And my mom was maybe around 9 or 10. She and her older sister would hold on to their younger siblings while my lolo was pushing the cart. And then when she would tell me this, I was so engrossed. Naiiyak pa ako dahil feel na feel ko yung emotions ni Mommy. And, ano pa ba? And then when they got oh, this is the very interesting part. When they got to Malolos, it was already dusk, 5, 6 o'clock p.m. And then, their house was commandeered by the Japanese at that time. So, for the longest time, hindi nila natirhan yun. But I think at the time, the Japanese left the house. So, they went back. And then, syempre, my lola had to rest. And my mom had to go to the kitchen to boil water, to get water for my lola. Eh, madilim na. So, when she was walking sa kitchen nila to get to the balon at the back, di ba, the old houses, this was a 17 late or early 1800s house. So, when kailangan nila dumaan dun sa may parang banggera to get to the balon, nakapaa sila. They didn't have shoes. And they were Tiyongsons. May kaya, pero everybody were, naghihirap nung panahon na yun. So, nakapaa siya. When she got to the kitchen, may mga naiwan palang nails yung Japanese. So, parang Jesus Christ tumagos sa foot niya. This, I don't know how long that nail was, but it pierced right through her foot. And ilan buwan siyang di nakalakad. Hence the story that her feet, the left foot is size 7 and the right foot is 6.5.
Mm.
Hindi nagpantay because she was bedridden for a long time. Buti, I had a grand uncle who was a doctor And siguro at the time, the Americans were coming back, nakakuha ng penicillin. Kaya my mom was always, very, pag nagkukwento siya about penicillin, wonder drug talaga because that was the thing that made her well. So those stories, yung human survival story of the World War II were the stories that parang yung uh, started that interest in me. Plus the fact that every Saturday I would watch combat.
Ayun.
8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, di ba,
Vic
Phil?
Moro and Rick
Saturdays.
Jason. Channel 7.
My dad, and meron kaming driver na matanda, si Manong Elmer. So pag 8 o'clock, ay nakaabang na. Tapos yung tipong pag natamaan pa yung
Antena.
kalaban. Yes,
Ay,
mga
correct.
ganun pa sila ng dad ko. Nakakatawa. So, and when I was little, my favorite set of toys were this combat set. Plastic siya. There's the helmet, may granada, and I would pretend po nakagating ko yung granada, babato ko, and it had water inside. Mga ganon. But I guess the main reason yung stories ng mom ko about how hard life was. And I guess because my lola got sick, na-spare sila friend from being, sa Battle of Manila because they were living in Binondo, around that area. So na-spare sila of all that, atrocities during the battle. So, in a way, parang thank God na hindi ka agad gumaling lola ko and they had to go back to the
Yes.
province, something like that. Otherwise, baka wala kami lahat dito kung, if they
Oo
went
naman. I mean,
through the battle, di ba?
but those are the things that basically would determine the fate of people or little decisions like that, diba?
Yes.
So your approach was basically humanitarian, no? The humanitarian, the human aspect of war itself. Samantalang kami ni John Ray or Phil, we were into the more yung mga triggers namin would be of course military history books and of course just like you combat also. I mean, it was our generation. But I think Phil also had Batman there also, So if you go look at the background of Phil. So anyway, so from here, okay, let us first discuss this what today is September 3. Okay. So yesterday was September 2, and of course, without emphasizing, September 1, of course, was the day before yesterday. And these 3 dates are very crucial to World War II history. So September 1 is what? What does September 1 signify? Phil, if you're familiar, September 1 is aside from being my birthday anyway.
Sabihin ko na sana yun eh. I was about to mention that.
Happy
Well,
birthday!
Thank you.
Belated friend.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes.
That would be something related to Tokyo Bay and a certain battleship with the number 63.
That would be September 2.
Yes.
So
Oh,
September 1 basically is actually, this is the thing about World War II. For us, World War II, it has very compact dates. So September 1 is the start of World War II when
yeah.
Germany invaded Poland. Okay, so that's
Yes.
September 1.
1939.
Then September 2 is what you're talking about, USS Missouri, when they had the surrender. But September 3 is also important. Okay, aside from it being the birthday of my son, September 3 is important because it's the date of another surrender.
Yes.
Yamashita.
Yes, exactly. So you have the Yamashita surrenders. So, what was so what how would what was significant about the end of the war? How did the end of the war um, uh, affect post-war development in Asia? Because that's in the last episode, kasi we discussed the end of the war, right? And we were talking about the coup attempts and everything. So we're not going to go into that anymore. But what we're going to discuss right now is the surrender ceremony that occurred in, especially in Tokyo Bay. So what can you say about that surrender ceremony? Was the fact that I wrote an article about it, and it's coming out in the next few days. Is that um, just before the surrender occurred, the two sides were very unsure of each other. Diba? Um, the Americans, the Allies didn't know what the Japanese would do, and the Japanese were afraid that the propaganda that had been inculcated into them by their government would end up with with them being brutalized by the Americans. So they were afraid that the Americans would, or the victors would be very brutal against them, because they themselves had been brutal to occupied territories, okay, or in places that they had occupied. But what was so insignificant was the were two things. Number one was that when Japan had accepted the Potsdam Declaration, from a very warlike country, they shifted to a very submissive entity. Okay, the Japanese became very compliant to the victorious allied powers, and the best example of that was when MacArthur from Manila decided to go to Japan, um, and these are the days leading towards the surrender itself, and he he went there. And who was his guard? Who guarded uh, MacArthur? And none other than the Imperial Japanese Army.
Yes.
They were the ones who guarded MacArthur. So, and there was a very big gamble that MacArthur did, because of the fact that there were fears that the the Japanese who surrendered might just suddenly turn on them. But he
Yes.
disregarded that, and yet he proved to the doubters that the Japanese would abide by the terms of the surrender, and that then would be the prevailing atmosphere upon which the surrender took place. When the Japanese delegation had um, was on en route, this, like, we have this footage here of the Japanese delegation that just arrived on the battleship Missouri. Over there, you have the Allied high command. They have MacArthur reading his speech, and what is so significant there was that there was one Japanese reporter who was on his way towards the Missouri. Okay, and for him, knew that the war had ended. And why? Because when he was in that small U.S. Navy vessel that was bringing them to the battleship, an American seaman offered him coffee. And that little act of that American seaman, of that U.S. Navy guy, showed to the uh, particular Japanese reporter that the war had ended, that they were not enemies anymore. And on a larger scale, when the delegation, the Japanese delegation, that one you see in the footage, when they went aboard and they listened to MacArthur, MacArthur's speech was very magnanimous. It was very, it showed to the Japanese that the Allies would not brutalize them. Okay, and it 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 created an atmosphere of goodwill. And over there, we see here that, but even though there was that projected at magnanimity that the Allies were showing, we saw here also the heavy bombers that were flying over the ships and the ships themselves. Because one thing that the Allies wanted to impress upon the Japanese was that this was the military might that defeated you. So the Allies were still not taking any chances also at the same time. And in fact, there were some combat aircraft that were readied just in case there would be some diehard Japanese who would try to attack. So here we have here um, a situation wherein the surrender took place. The fears of Japanese diehards, though, um, of course, in hindsight, we would see that nothing happened. But at that time, it was a present. It was a what they could consider clear and present danger. Instead, what happened was you had a very peaceful surrender ceremony that happened. And from then on, things were done in a uh, atmosphere of no severe or serious disruption. And here we see footages of why so. Um, a crucial figure in the occupation of Japan was none other than MacArthur himself. So, were you familiar, Phil or Des? Are you familiar with any of the policies that MacArthur had instituted when he became the Supreme Allied Commander in Tokyo? Your mic, Phil.
For one, the most outstanding thing that struck me among MacArthur's policies was his decision, his push to retain the emperor.
Yeah.
Uh, that was one of the things that struck me the most. And it was a crucial move because given that the cultural situation in Japan was that the emperor is God, anything that could have happened to him, anything that could have negated to him, might agitate or make the Japanese people turn away. But with using the emperor's prestige, with one blow, he was able to use the emperor to keep the Japanese people in line. That's how I saw it.
And one thing that worked in favor of the emperor then was the perception also of the Allied High Command that Hirohito himself was not the decisive policy-making leader of the Japanese government. He was seen more as a figurehead and
Figurehead.
puppet of the
Mhm.
military at that time, of the Japanese military being the one that really called all the shots there. Then even the civilian side of the government of the Japanese was thoroughly cowed by the pervasive military influence of the imperial Japanese military. So
Mhm.
that worked also in favor of Hirohito being retained. And at the same time, also, we Japan was the newly defeated Japan was probably, as you did mention, was probably in the throes of social disruption.
Yeah.
And you had, of course, the presence of the Russians up in the north, didn't know exactly what they would do. They were
Mhm.
intimating that they wanted to carve up Japan also, have a sphere of influence, of which were being well, which was resisted by Mangar. So in those situations, there was really a need for a a unifying figure for
Mhm.
the Japanese, and we we saw here that a society that had started the war as a very militarized society suddenly make a 180-degree turn. Is that correct? Say 180-degree turn and turn
Yes.
into one that was how would you characterize Japanese society post-war?
If I may say something lang about the
Yes,
surrender, friend.
yes.
When the Japanese came here first, diba, in late August to discuss the
Mm,
terms of surrender,
mhm.
MacArthur didn't even want to be, didn't even want to talk to them.
Yes,
Only his
yes,
junior officers were there for the terms, right?
yes,
There's this famous picture where he was on the balcony of the
yes, yes.
pockmarked City Hall, diba? And the Japanese were coming. And then he made this very good, I think, a very, ano ba tawag dyan? Very intimidating
Mhm.
rule that the guards that were supposed to pick up the Japanese from the
Mhm.
airport or whatever were all 6-footers.
Yes, yes.
So parang wow, di ba? And of
Mm,
course, we Asians, di naman tayo ganun
mm,
katangkad. So anyway,
mm,
I saw in MacArthur yung 180-degree turn then that when
mm,
it was the time for signing the instrument of surrender in the
mhm,
USS Missouri, the speech was so calm
mhm,
and it really evoked peace. In fact, when he was reading the script, people around him was saying nanginginig yung hands niya.
mhm,
So, di ba, it was a very important event for him. So, Yun lang naman yung take ko on that. And in fact, si Halsey, Bull Halsey said to
Yes.
MacArthur, if I may, I want to have the Emperor's white horse. But he never got it. He never got it.
He
Never
So,
never
got it.
got
Yeah.
it.
dun pa lang, di ba, nakita natin yung
Yeah.
yan. Yan yung mga nakatalikod because
Yes.
yun nga.
They, that was the Imperial Army that was
Yes.
in the on the first day of MacArthur's arrival. They were the
Yes.
ones who were guarding him,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see that they were facing away. When why were they facing away? Not that because they were ignoring MacArthur, but
It's their
because
tradition.
it's a tradition to face away because they are watching out for anybody who can attack the ones that they're protecting. So that's why the soldiers are facing away from MacArthur's convoy. So just
Right.
so that they would be alert and watch out for any possible attack. And you can see here
Yes.
the devastation. Yes, yes, Phil.
Yeah. Yes, because prior to the surrender, there was a coup attempt
Mm-hmm.
against
Yes,
to take over the Imperial Japanese government and continue the war.
yes,
So it
Yes.
was not an idle threat; it was a legitimate threat.
Mm-hmm.
yes. It was not. In fact, and we're only talking about a 2 week period
Yes,
since MacArthur arrived, because MacArthur arrived late August, and then that coup attempt happened uh, in from August 14 to August 15, in that period, 14 to
yes,
15 time period, because that was just before the emperor's announcement,
Yes.
mhm,
which was recorded by the Japanese imperial household, and and um, and that's why things were very volatile there then.
Yeah.
They didn't know, but it's that quality when we talk about MacArthur. And I think Des would later this week, right?
Yes.
You have a seminar
Webinar.
on a webinar on MacArthur, right?
Yep. If you can
Yes,
all
and
mark your calendars, that's going to be this Saturday, September 5, 8
yes,
p.m. The
which
Intramuros Administration Facebook page. Yeah.
is going
it's
to
about
be 8 p.m. and it's going to be about MacArthur. It's
Yes.
a webinar that's going to dissect the character of MacArthur, or what he
Yep.
was, and here we have somebody who is larger than life. Okay, MacArthur was a guy who's larger than life. He some would I mean Eisenhower, for example, I was at Eisenhower who said that he learned
Oh,
drama
yeah.
with MacArthur. So
What did
something
he
that.
learn? He said dramatics.
Yes, but MacArthur was somebody. Yes, he knew how to handle public relations
Yes.
like a pro. At the same time, he was actually a very gifted military man, and like all gifted military men, they also have their ups and downs. Okay, they
Mm-hmm.
have their defeats, but the thing is that he had a very keen sense of tri warfare, if you're going to use that term, which is air, sea, land. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he had a grasp of that, which
Yeah.
was very rare among officers during that time around the world. Okay, for example,
Yes.
in Germany, Germans were very good in land warfare, maybe air warfare also, but they were terrible in sea warfare. But here, MacArthur, in his experience in 1942 onwards, in the island hopping campaign, in the invasion of the Philippines, in the liberation of the Philippines, in the plans to invade Japan, and even in Korean War, it was his appreciation of combined arms that
Right.
set him apart from many other generals. Okay, so one could not say that using Bataan as an example, or the Chinese invasion in 1950, late 1950 in Korea, that MacArthur was a bad general. No, one could not, because he would count he would be a complex figure with yes disastrous defeats, but at the same time very
Yes.
brilliant victories. Okay, so you
Correct.
cannot
Correct.
stereotype MacArthur. Um,
uh,
eh,
can
yes,
I add something? From my readings about MacArthur, one of the things that struck that his one advantage was that among all the generals during the first wave of the Japanese attacks, he was the only one that was able to get out, and therefore this is my own observation, is that he learned from their mistakes. He had the opportunity to learn lessons and apply those lessons in order to fight back. All the other generals, Percival, the commander of the ABC fleet, they were all captured or either killed. He he got out and was
Yes.
able to learn lessons. I think
Well,
that's his one
yeah.
advantage.
And then because of the fact also that well, he actually didn't want to get out, right? Because of the
Yeah, he
fact
didn't
that
want
Yes,
to.
he didn't
he
want to. He
didn't
He was
wanted
want.
to.
ordered.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I take issue with those who talk about dugout dog, who try to malign his reputation by saying that he was MacArthur was not a coward because of the fact that he actually led in the front line. Because if you think about
Yeah, the Rainbow
1941,
Division.
1942,
Number
Corregidor
one.
was actually the front line. You were not in the rear if you were in Corregidor
Yes.
because
Yes,
because you
yes.
were being bombed daily by the Japanese. So
In
Yes.
fact,
so uh, that is what I'm talking about when we when we evaluate MacArthur. And then at the same time also is that he even participated in the Battle of Manila, not just as commander, but in the assault in his
His
old
penthouse
yes, his penthouse of Manila Hotel.
in Manila Hotel.
Yeah,
Penthouse
Fred,
slash
about the
ano.
dugout dog. That was
yes,
just
yes,
the moniker given to him by the men of Bataan.
yes,
But the men of
Yes.
Corregidor didn't call him that because he was
yes,
there. You know,
yes,
He
the
was with them.
heaviest
He was.
bombings, he was out there. In
mm,
fact, that was his style since World War One, right?
yes,
He
yes,
perfected that style. Kaya in World War One, it was highly decorated, called
yes.
Bravest of the Brave. So
Mm.
that dugout dog moniker was given by the men of Bataan. But he wasn't in Bataan, eh. He was in Corregidor. But the men of
And then
Corregidor didn't call him that.
yes, and then it was like hyped up by later on
Yeah.
press. The press later hyped that on, and of course the anti MacArthur clique got into that theme that MacArthur was hiding and so on and so forth. But again, if you look at the nature of MacArthur, that person, he was a very courageous person. He was gifted, but
Yes.
he was also very opinionated, and that could be a character flaw of his, that being, because if you're and that is a common character flaw in somebody who is very very um how would you say this, who was an intellectual and at the same time very assertive. The
Yeah.
tendency to be very opinionated and very difficult to what do you call it, once he sets his mind into that, it's sometimes difficult to get him out of that type of belief. So even though it's a paradox where as a military strategist he would have the flexibility to adapt to situations, at the same time a personal characteristic of being very opinionated might um, tends to make him stick to something that then also leads to um, disaster
Mistakes.
later on, or a mistake. Like for example, what happened in Korea in 1950, late 1950s, when reports were being disregarded about the entry of the Chinese, because for in the in of the entry of the Chinese. But before we continue, let's greet some of our uh, viewers. Okay, so hello, Dan Ma. Dan
Dan!
Ma, yes, he's our friend
Hello,
Dan.
Dan!
Hello, our dear good friends. Dan Ma is how would I characterize Dan? He's an history enthusiast, and at the same time he's also with the reenactor group. He specializes in Imperial Japanese military. He's one of the most competent or most knowledgeable guys when it comes to the Imperial Japanese military. And in fact, he's so competent that he actually looks like an Imperial Japanese infantryman. There. Then, uh, then we have here Roy. Roy Macaras, happy birthday. Yeah, so yes. So because he's
Hello,
very nice to
Roy.
me, yes, he's a lawyer if I'm correct. And since he's very nice to me, I will be very nice to him and say thank you very much, Roy. Uh, and since it's happy birthday, Jose Antonio Custodio, I'll take off from that and say on September 5, we have what was mentioned by Des, the MacArthur activity, right? And you flash
The
that portrait
webinar, yes.
that that webinar, and there you have. But there's something very significant also about September 5, aside from that webinar. And if I'm correct, that is the birthday also of Des,
Ah,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So
Working
happy
birthday, eh, no?
birthday. So advance happy birthday, Des.
Thank you,
And
thank you.
yeah, so I hope you have many more birthdays to come, and we will. Because of the new normal that we have here, we cannot go to your house and eat everything in your refrigerator.
Uh,
So
Yeah.
we will just schedule that for when we all get vaccinated, so we all need
Sure.
to survive this. Then we have here, who else? Yeah, we have here Albert Labrador. Do you guys know Albert
Albert!
Labrador? Yes, he's there. Albert Labrador is a man of few words, and in fact, he has a smiley emoji which he put there, and which means that he approves of what we are doing there. Albert Labrador is also an actor in this case. He's also a history enthusiast, and at the same time, he does reenactments, like I said. But if I'm correct, more on the U.S. side. Sometimes you see him as a German Wehrmacht officer, very sunburned German Wehrmacht officer, if I would say so. And then we have Eufemio Agbayani, who is watching from Quezon City. I just realized that when the surrender was signed on September 2 in Tokyo Bay, it was still September 1 in mainland USA. By the time we remember the 17th anniversary of Yamashita's surrender this morning, the US is commemorating the Tokyo Bay surrender aboard USS Missouri on the other side with International Date Line. Tama po ba?
Oo,
Tamang-tama,
ano?
Eufemio.
yes.
Isa kang
Oo.
tunay na historiador, because
Oo.
Eufemio is also in
Hello.
history.
Yeah.
Tama ba, John Ray, right?
Yes. And
Ano,
so from
batchmate mo ba
UP
si
history,
Eufemio?
junior ko siya. And currently, I think connected siya sa National Historical Commission.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yung famous
Di ba
with
you worked with
Okay.
him?
NHTP.
Des, di ba you work with him? You've
Yeah.
met him na,
Yes,
si
yes.
Eufemio.
Yung famous with NHTP.
Yes, so thank you very much, Eufemio. And yes, you're correct in
Thanks
what you
for
said.
watching.
Thank you for watching. And then we have Sito Moramba. Panalo naman ng mga kano,
Hello,
sabi ni Sito
Sito.
Moramba. He
From
comes from
Plymouth.
Plymouth, United Kingdom, and panalo naman ng kano. Siyempre naman, nanalo man talaga ang mga kano. Natalo ang Hapon. Then we have here,
Natalo nga ba mga Hapon?
ha? O nga, nanalo naman sila sa huli, di ba? And then we
Oo
have
eh.
here Micheline Espiritu Suarez, or
Hi,
Micheline Suarez,
Michelin!
who is from the who's a member of the Museum Volunteers of the Philippines, or the MVP, and she says hi, Rino, Desiree, and Jose. Yes,
Beautiful Lola, Michelin.
yeah, she's very
Congratulations
beautiful.
on your new
Congrats.
apo.
Uh-uh.
Pinakamagandang Lola. No,
Sobra,
friend?
no? Napaka ano to eh. Para siyang ano to eh. Para ano to eh, yung bang fashion model pa rin hanggang ngayon, di ba? Pag nakikita mo siya. Then we have Eufemio. I don't know. So, then we have Tito Samargo. I think the term you're searching for is hubris. Yes. Regarding MacArthur. Tito Sarmago. Yes, it's correct. Nuclear power helps. Of course it does. Nuclear power always helps. Yes. Not unless it's
Uh,
Chernobyl.
or Three Mile Island.
Three Mile Island. That doesn't help.
Uh,
So we have here Johann Paulus von Osterreich.
Wow.
He makes me want to do some sort of salute right now, but no, it's not politically
not,
correct.
it's not. Yes.
Nope, we don't do that salute here. So, but I have this it right now. But maybe he's Prussian.
Oo.
There you go.
And ano,
So
and,
greetings from Pasig.
and there's one here, Babati, I'll also greet, shout out to my sister in the US, Ruby, she's also watching.
Yes, and there's Gigi. Gigi
Gigi.
Arena. Says
Hi,
shout out to
Gigi.
my handsome Gigi. Who's handsome?
Brad,
Brad.
You two are handsome.
Yeah, of
of
course.
course,
Yes, of
Hindi ka
course you
papalag.
are. Yeah.
she's a Brad.
Wala nga na to,
She's
walang
a Brad.
basagan ng trip, di ba?
Walang
So yes,
basagan.
wala. So those and the others who are watching, okay, thank you very much for tuning into our munting alay sa katapusan ng digmaan ng ikalawang, what do you call it? Ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig. There.
Digmaang pandaigdig.
Yes, which is
Since yun ang- since
yes,
since
Phil.
that is our topic, I have just one curious question
Yes.
that our viewers might also be interested in.
Yes.
what happened to those responsible for the atrocities in Manila after the war ended?
They kind of died.
A lot of
They
them
kind
were
of died.
perished in the Battle
Because
of
the ones in
Manila.
Manila, they actually kind of died, like, ano nga, para akong ano to eh, para akong valley girl
Dudadete.
nito ah. Para akong valley girl nito. They kind of died. No, but the thing is that the entire Manila garrison was wiped out. So you must be referring to those who were outside of Manila, but who were part of
Yes.
the command chain, right? So you're talking
Yes.
about Yokoyama,
Yes.
Yamashita, Fujishige,
Yamashita.
Yes.
these people, right?
Mhm.
Fujishige, if I remember, was if I remember correctly, was convicted and executed, if I remember correctly. Okay. Then you had, of course, Yamashita, who was some people say that he was unjustly executed by a vindictive MacArthur, but then again, yes, tama si Tito Sarmago. Yeah, they were mostly KIA. Yeah, because Iwabuchi died in the battle.
Yes.
Okay, and so with
Yes.
his staff. Okay, and si ano to si Yokoyama, who was the, kasi the thing kasi with the Battle of Manila is that you cannot use the argument that Iwabuchi was a crazy guy. No, it was not true. Iwabuchi was a sound military commander who recognized the limitations of the motley array of troops under his command, which was composed of from seasoned marine, what they call naval landing force, to armies, a battalion or so of army soldiers, to um, sailors who didn't have ships, or even Japanese civilians who had been dragooned into the Manila Defense Force. And that type of force was only good for garrison warfare, or static warfare. They were not useful for maneuver type warfare. So the argument of Ibuchi was to stay put, of which was then accepted by the Japanese high command at that time, although there was a lot of debate. But then in that situation, there was then a command structure that was set up. So Iwabuchi would be the functional commander in Manila, but under him would be army troops. And some of them would be deployed in the post office all the way to the Santa Mesa area. And then Iwabuchi would be put under the command of Yokoyama, who was commander of Shimbo Army Group.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
Yes.
Yokoyama answered to, we all know who he answered to, which was who that would be Yamashita. So that was, and therefore atrocities in Manila were then put squarely on the responsibility on the shoulders of Yamashita after the war. So that
Yes.
that
Yes.
that's what happened to the repercussions. Yokoyama saw time, but if I remember correctly, he was also one of those who was pardoned in the
Part.
Philippines. Yeah, he was pardoned by
Quirino.
Quirino, if I'm correct. There you go.
That's part of my question is that it's not exactly about what happened to those guys in response to Manila, but subsequent events that took place. Like many people right now do not know that we had the trials here in Manila,
Yeah,
and those who were executed were you sent me a picture of it. You visited that, Jose,
yeah,
in Bilibid. In Man-
yes, yes, yes,
there's a marker there, and
yeah,
part of that is that there was also immediately after the war a commission to look at the issue of collaborators to the Japanese
mm,
forces. So there
yes,
are a
yes,
lot of things that is important to be remembered, to be discussed or not forgotten about after the war. Uh, those things are important. So with the World War II Foundation, my other question now is how do the collaboration issue fit in with the end of World War II?
Right. Nice
It's one
question,
of the
Phil.
it's one of the toughest questions.
Yes.
That's
It's
it's
very
one of the most
contentious.
controversial questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's but okay, but before you answer that, okay, let's greet a few more people here.
Okay.
My high school batchmate Nineveh Bukirin Reyes, who's now a teacher at yeah, she's so sweet. She says happy birthday, Jose. Thank you very much, Nineveh. So she's a high school teacher. Sorry, she's a teacher at Makati, in Makati,
Mhm.
if I'm correct. Okay, she was my class. She was my schoolmate in Cavite City, long time ago. Which we will not mention the date anymore. And then we have here Toim Leon Imao. Okay, the
High
Toim
time.
He's the
Wow.
huh? The
Ooh.
Toim Leon. We have ano to, we have the Toim Leon Imao, who has a phone in question. What is your favorite MacArthur movie that has been churned out in the past several decades? Hello to you all. Hello to you, Toim. My favorite movie has always been and will always be Gregory Peck. MacArthur. That will
The
always be
American
my favorite
Caesar.
movie. The
Marami ng
one that
mali,
I
pero galing ni Gregory Peck.
yes.
That's
The one
American
that
Caesar, di ba?
yes, American Philip Cesar, yes. And then the one that I would really have problems with would be the one where was it Tommy Lee Jones?
Oo, shoot.
Ay.
Ang
Medyo
layo.
nahirapan ako doon sa parang
Oh.
Oo.
hindi,
Even
magandang
Quezon's
lalaki si
name.
hindi maganda lalaki si MacArthur eh, mahirap eh.
Yeah.
Si
Oo.
Tommy
Gregory
Lee Jones
Peck
eh.
was okay.
Gregory
Yes,
Peck
yes.
was, he played
He
MacArthur
got
very
it.
well. Even the style of talking, di
Yes.
ba? And then
Kasi
have
this
you
is
But
once read yung Quezon's
yes.
Flame? Remember they got this sloppy guy to play MacArthur?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
That was so
And then
good for me.
the funniest, if I remember, was it's actually a reenactment, the 50th anniversary reenactment of the late landing, which I remember. I
Yung
don't know.
nadapa.
No, yung muntik ng madapa. Yung muntik ng
Nadapa.
madapa.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, kasi he the landing vessel was still moving, and then he got down. So ano yan, the momentum just like catapulted him out of the
Inertia.
on the, ano to, and then inertia, and then he just like he almost tripped eh. But good thing he regained his balance. So that could have been great. And then that spurred a lot of urban legends that MacArthur daw actually daw tripped because of
Actually, there's
what?
a lot of
Yeah.
myths, di ba? Saying that that was staged, MacArthur
Yes.
staged. But no, that wasn't staged. You know who
Yes.
staged his landing? Patton, but not MacArthur.
Yeah.
Patton in Sicily.
Yes.
Pero
Diba?
MacArthur was
But 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 it
spontaneous.
shows also that these generals were not just competent military guys, but they were also very familiar with information operations as we call it now, which is communication. What is your course in college? Des?
Food science.
Food
Layo,
science. There
no?
you go.
My
Layo, no?
master's degree is in food science.
Yes. That's why it's nice to go around and eat there. So,
An
okay.
army travels in its stomach.
Yes. And then,
So, may
Kaya
relation.
idol ko si Maria Orosa because she was a
Karaga
food
Maria Osawa.
technologist,
So let's not talk
right?
about that.
Oras.
So,
Orosa naman.
Rosa.
Maria
because of her two
Orosa. Okay.
inventions, soya lac and the rock cookies, it
Yeah.
saved a
I
lot of
like Maria Orosa.
interviews.
Okay, there.
Diba?
Maria Orosa. Yes.
Okay.
Stop laughing, Phil. Okay, there.
Laughing.
So let's see now. We have here Aleli Canosa. Aleli Canosa is a beautiful woman from Bulacan. Yes, and she's a member of the Bulacan, Bulacan Heritage Society. There's a Tagalog. There's the Filipino word that the Tagalog
Pamana.
name escapes it. One of those, ano to eh. It's linked with Professor Dr. Um,
Nick Tiongson.
Veneracion.
Ah, yes.
Mm.
Dr.
Hi,
Veneracion. Yes.
Lely. Bulakenya din ako my mom.
Yeah. Yeah, ano sabi mo nga ano to, you were part
Descended from the women
you
of Malolos.
you were the woman, you were with the women of Malolos. Yes.
120 years ago.
120 years ago.
My
Immortal yan.
Nick Tiongson kasi is an uncle and we trace.
Yes.
So we belong to the same family tree. So
There you go. So then we have how do you pronounce this? Kiefer?
Kiefer.
Kiefer.
Kiefer
Kiefer Zachary. My kind of day, and refreshing to hear this kind of talk, and we are very grateful for that. So we will always make you feel refreshed. Ayun, Miss Aleli Canosa is a descendant po ata of General Aleo Santos
Wow,
ata. Hello po.
BNA.
Tama ba yan, Aleli? Are you a descendant of of Alejo Santos? As you will find
BMA, no,
out.
friend?
Comment.
Bulacan Military...
Yes. Yeah, oo,
ano yung A?
the
Bulacan Military...
association.
Yun ba yun?
Hindi. The
BMA
R.
di ba? My uncle is a guerrilla there
Area.
Yes.
Area. Okay, yun. So we're going back. So where do we stop before we
I was
digress into
asking
The
about the
collaborator issue.
the
collaborator
collaborator?
issue.
Okay.
Why is it
So
still so controversial?
It's very contentious. That is why, naks may plugging pa.
That
That
is
is
why.
why naglabas kami ng libro tungkol dyan.
Yes,
Yes.
Wala akong
ako
sample
makagad.
dito ngayon.
Ano
It
to?
was,
Saan yun?
a very beautiful, it was the dissertation of Dr. Felisa Sihukotan, si Dr. Babit. And we published that, we launched it last year. It's about the collaborators, the Makapili, the paramilitary collaborators, Ganap, dami nila eh. Pati yung Philippine
Kalibati.
Constabulary, we talked a great deal about that.
Yes.
And the resulting People's Court, that was what you were asking about.
Yes.
That's the National War Crime Trials. Which,
Yes.
when you read the book, ang sakit well, kapwa Pilipino natin yung buried
Yes.
everything. Parang, it was a giant elephant that was put under the rug. Nakitang-kita mo pero wala kang magawa. Parang ganyan. So, the funding was stopped. Tapos, Rojas and his Congress was the one. And then suddenly, while they were trying all these collaborators, naglabas si Rojas ng amnesty.
Amnesty.
Diba, friend?
Amnesty.
1948. So,
Here.
it's a wonderful book. Grabe, ang daming matututunan.
Yeah.
You can PM us if you want to buy a copy. It's
Tito-
great. It
Tito.
talks about, masakit kasi it's kapwa nating Pilipino na mga
So, where is the book
collaborate.
available?
Yes,
It's
because
available in Solidaridad, Popular Bookstore.
online. Online. Do
Online,
you like,
yeah,
for
you
example,
can
in the
PM
new normal
us.
kasi, syempre. So,
Yeah.
because Tito Sarmago say, the title of the book is The Makapili,
Yes.
Other Military
Makapili.
Groups and Philippine Farmers During the
Yes.
Japanese Occupation in the Philippines. That's the
Yes.
title of the book, right?
Yes,
And do you sell
exactly.
copies?
Yes, you can message us yung Philippine World War II Memorial Foundation. So, yun, we can send you via courier or kung how
Yes.
you want it. But it's a really good book. Although
How much
it's
is
the
a copy?
other aspect, no? Kasi our other books were about heroes, ganyan. So this was another aspect when yun nga darker aspect kasi Filipinos,
May utang may
Fight
utang
na
ba ako sa Des,
sa
na
akin.
libro?
Meron ba?
Meron ba?
Nakalimutan ko na, friend. But there, thank you, John Ray. That's
There
our
you go.
Facebook page. Yeah, so you can message
Yes.
us if you want copies.
Okay. How much is
and
a
it's-
copy?
It's 495.
I
It's very
see.
extensive.
There you go.
Lahat ng mga paramilitary groups, even the smaller, yung YOIN, there was this YOIN, YOIN, the groups, and even provincial groups who helped the Japanese, nandyan. So a lot of massacres there also, a lot of atrocities committed by Filipinos against, kapwa Pilipino. But well, that's war, kaya kailangan matutunan din
Yes.
ng mga tao. So
And,
that's plugging na rin.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
precisely what we're doing here.
That's
we're
why-
we're helping everybody here in the advocacy. So, yeah. And Aleli, yes, she said yes, she is related to Alejo Santos himself. Yes.
That could help
So,
you in your research.
yes. So tama nga si
Eufemio.
Eufemio, si Kapeming. Yes. So, yes, so tama siya. So, Alejo Santos, descendant po. So, and Tito says, thank you for that. So, for the information that was provided. Okay, yes.
Okay. Now another question about related to that will link MacArthur. Is it true that it was MacArthur who made a recommendation for the general amnesty?
I'm not so sure about that.
Ewan ko kung State Department yun eh. Kung,
Baka State Department at the time kasi nag-change of heart na sila eh. But
Tsaka,
he was
that's-
the one who was
yeah.
really staunchly advocating to try all the collaborators in early 1945. And then the sad part, which is in that book also, while they got everybody, sila Yulo, or
Yes.
everybody who was working with the puppet government, and Rojas was there. Rojas was so haughty pa nga daw when they caught him. And then, because they were friends, kinuha pa ni MacArthur. Inano pa niya. Finlay pa niya to Manila si Rojas, tapos wala na. Diba? But the others were there. And yung masakit kapag nabasa niyo yung book, only the small fry really spent time,
Yes.
in the
Parang
Actually,
parang
lang
ano to
ata
eh.
yung
Parang
na-convict eh.
parang
Oo.
parang ganito yan eh. So what else is new in this country, di ba?
And
So what
masakit,
else is new? Di ba?
the People's Court itself was working very efficiently. Kahit na wala
Yeah.
silang masyadong pera, funding was cut. But they were really working very hard to get these
Yes.
people tried. But, naman dito, money talks, ganyan. So, ayan na yung witness. Biglang at the last moment, nagkaka-amnesia yung witness.
Tapos
Because
ano to, pwede
they
siya mag
off.
pwede siya mag party kahit meron lockdown. Okay, I'm talking about something else. But anyway, so ano yan, samantalang
That's something
yung ano,
else.
So,
so yung ano to, yung maliit na bubugbog. Anyway, but like I said, what else is new in this country? So what else?
Yeah.
Ganun yan eh. It's ever since it's been like that. And what we're talking about here basically is that um yung but yeah, Des was correct was saying that the people's courts, the way that we conducted, even with uh, the Japanese personnel who were being tried by Filipinos, because during right
Quirino.
after independence, the proceedings were then taken over by Filipinos,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and the perception was that these were very very fair trials that were being conducted with and these were Japanese who had done unspeakable acts of barbarism on Filipinos, and yet Filipino lawyers were defending
Yes.
these people, and they were doing it competently. Okay, and that's why historians tend to praise the way that we had conducted this trials. And when it came to the amnesty that you were talking about, there was this other one, which was the one that was done, was blanket pardon that was done during the time of Quirino,
Quirino.
and the reasons for that would be linked, of course, to the peace uh,
Yeah, the
the
San
peace
Francisco
treaty, the San Francisco peace treaty that was
San
being
Francisco Peace
Plus,
Treaty.
friend, Cold War na eh. They needed
yes.
Japan, right?
Yes.
Japan as a bulwark against the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Now, Eufemio Agbayani has his question on related to the People's Court, who kept the documents. The National Archives has the documents. Okay, they're called the war crimes trials, if I'm correct. If I'm correct, okay.
I
I
think
think you
UP
have
Live
it.
also has, friend.
Yeah, I don't know who has
I
the more
think,
extensive one, kasi they're all in bundles in the National Archives.
Mm-mm.
And they were supposed to be copied. Uh, man,
Have they
now
been digitized?
I think at the very least, I think many will have been photocopied. I think many have been
Have they?
photocopied.
Then there should
Eufemio,
be a
I have
project to
an,
digitize them.
What?
There should be a project to digitize them.
yeah.
Katulad na nangyari na ginawa doon sa US
Alam mo, ano to,
Philippine Guerrilla Records.
alam mo, estudyante pa ako, yun na narinig ko is to copy it, to like this. Tapos nung naging uso na yung digitization, yun din narinig ko. And that's like around
Nangyari na
20
ba?
years ago. That was 20
Kaya
years
nga.
ago.
That's my
Tapos
Kaya
ngayon,
first, John, Eufemio, buy the book and you will see the bibliography
Yeah.
of Dr. Tan.
yes. Si
Malalaman mo
Dan,
kung saan niya nakuha. Yeah.
si Danma is
Very,
asking,
very
sorry.
wonderfully
Yes.
researched book. Yeah.
Kasi
And much of it came from the proceedings of the People's Court.
si Felice has really been the she's been the parang leading academician on the Makapili and Kempei Tai, right? She
And
also
Kempei
did
Tai,
something
yes.
on the Kempei Tai.
Yes.
It was an earlier book, Kempei Tai of the
That was her
Philippines.
master's thesis.
Yes, yes.
Yun, Kempei Tai. And then the Makapili, the paramilitary collaborators, was her dissertation.
My master's thesis was on the Battle of the Liberation of
Battle of
Manila.
Manila.
Yes, that was my
Ayun ang
master's
utang mo
thesis.
sa akin, friend.
Ano?
Ayan, yung manuscript niyan.
Oo, sige, ano to? Naka-lockdown naman tayo ngayon eh. So, I don't think I'm going anywhere. So, most likely I'll cough out that book for you. So, yun. So and one last muna na to question because is that that perception of the Makapili using the bayong, where'd that come from? Anybody
It
familiar
actually
with that?
happened. The bayong was so common, it was used as a mask.
Yes. Okay. So there, and so
Wala.
that one could
Walang
not say,
photo.
that that is not a what do you call it, a not a
It's not an
Pinoy
urban
Hollywood
legend.
creation.
It's not an urban legend.
Okay, there you go. So that answers Dan MA's question. So going back, so yes, Phil, or Desiree or John Ray.
Medyo mahina yung voice, friend. Di ko marinig.
Okay, so
Okay.
ano yun? Yes, Phil, continue what you were saying.
Okay. Another things about since we're talking about the legacy of the end of World War II, the end of World War II,
Hmm.
that's I'll focus on another point since we've touched on the collaboration issue. There's another controversial part of the end of World War II that I've read about, and this is about charges being filed against guerrilla units for alleged excesses committed because they
Hmm.
thought this was these Filipinos were uh, the fake guerrillas, those who turned into banditry. And
Hmm.
Mm.
one of the reasons why there was a blanket amnesty was because, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we didn't know who the bandits were and who were the collaborators or which is which. Is that
See?
that's that claim true or a revisionist thing that I was told?
Pwede ring mga war profiteers. Tapos eventually, yung
Yes,
later on, yung naghahanap na ng recognition ng mga guerrillas, yung mga ito ay nag apply for recognition, di ba?
ang dami
Those,
kasi nun eh.
That's
There were a lot
why,
of yeah, sorry. Yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
Des.
that's why, di ba, friend, after the war, it was so hard for the Americans kasi in getting the roster, they knew that a lot of them are lying.
are bogus.
Di
Ano yan
ba?
eh,
Oo, oo.
it appeared,
Marley, sorry.
sorry,
Ka
also,
talaga.
Why? Ano na yan?
Marley ka talaga.
yun. So, ano yun, ano ba tawag dito? And it wasn't just,
Halata
of
mo ko
course,
ah.
yung guerrilla group. Mamumula na si Phil. Oh. Ano to? It wasn't just guerrilla organizations that were spurious, like Kronika. And but the thing is that you also had the death rates. There were allegations also padding of deaths because of the fact that compensation would be given. Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
so that's why there was when I remember when I was writing my thesis on the Battle of Manila, there was controversy on the actual number of people killed during the Battle of Manila because there were allegations that the that
Funeraria
bodies,
Kyoge.
yeah, where yeah, there was some magical things going on in the counts of and the moment you attach compensation to something, especially in our society, it's like uh, it practically attracts profiteers. Okay,
Yes.
and it has never stopped. I mean, up to now, we still see that particular phenomenon that comes on, and well, so and so the thing here is that um, we had that in guerrilla rosters. We had that in death. I mean, what is the death rate? Well, how many Filipinos died in World War II?
1,111 plus thousand,
Thousand
right?
three hundred ninety-eight.
Million, sorry.
Yeah,
One,
million.
398.
Three nine something like that. I mean, I think we're the only country, I think, with an exact number.
Is it? Are we the only
I
country that
don't.
we had that?
Apparently, we are, or one of the very few,
Yeah.
because everybody goes through round. Probably, the Japanese would go between the Japanese number is 2.5 million to 3 million. That's the way that's their Japanese na yan, huh? So you'd expect the Japanese to be very specific, diba? But they can't. And they have 1 million unaccounted, so they go like that. The Americans, same also. But tayo, it's very precise.
Well,
So, so that's the thing. How could you?
Baka magaling
How
lang
could a
magbilang.
Ba, ang galing nga magbilang. Yun. So that's why,
Magaling
that's
tayo
where
sa
the,
math.
so that's where the questions all came out. Why do we have a
Oh,
very
because
precise number? So the
that's why.
tallies,
So
And
my
it's
question is
difficult to
this
make that
now.
precise number, friend, because may napapanganak, di ba?
oo.
Yeah.
Especially at
Oh,
that
and
time, may mga midwife
one
lang, wala
question:
namang
is there
census.
is there an exact number for those killed in Tramuros sa memoriam? It says an estimated
Well,
100,000.
No,
for the entire Manila.
for the entire
Oh,
Manila is 100,000. Sa Intramuros, mga they're saying around 5,000.
okay.
Six,
So
yeah.
if those
Uh,
numbers are not exact, so how can they arrive the exact number na up to the up to 1 million something
I
98?
think it was the census after the war. The whole
yes.
country. The whole country.
So they came up with that particular thing. So and then everything, there's also the aspect of compensation and all of those things. So you come up with it. So the precise number suddenly jumped out, no? So that's the thing. And so there were a lot of questions. Um, and but the thing is that it's very difficult, and even up to 1995, okay, when when several Filipino historians started questioning those numbers, it was difficult for them to do so precisely because of the fact that the survivors were still there. They were very much alive. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and when you start questioning numbers, it's like, are you making a personal dig against us? Something like that. So uh, uh, there was a lot of resistance to to question uh, how these numbers came out. Okay, so aside from what we mentioned about a while ago about these guerrilla numbers, okay, aside from somebody's medals, okay, spurious medals, and then we have here even yung death rates. Okay, so there were a lot of controversies, and it uh, it was a sensitive issue even as late as 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Parang alam ko yan, friend.
Yes, alam na alam mo yan.
Yes.
Okay.
Pero
So
ano yun
could
yun
you
na,
enlighten us?
pero namatay na sila yung mga ano to since namamatay na sila, wala nagaanong ano to, resistance to those and I would not call them revisionists, okay? Because these are actual scholars of World War II also, no? Sila namang banggit na lang pangalan nila. I will not mention their names, but they know who they are naman, no? So
One of the
ganon.
things that is very difficult is that sometimes to first-hand accounts is very difficult to debunk because they were there and we didn't go we did not went through that. So how do you historians go about it?
Ayan si John Ray naman ano to. John Ray, ikaw naman
Ano yan,
sumagot
ano yan?
dyan. Mas bata ka, mas naalala mo historiography. Ako matanda na ako,
No,
Ayan.
that ano
nalimutan ko na eh.
like you said, here's a first-hand account, and somebody claims that it's not true. How do you debunk somebody's first-hand account, but yung debunk is somebody who didn't went through it, but based on other records.
Actually, iba kasi yung treatment when it comes to oral history or oral traditions, di ba? Though very valid or very important sources ang mga individual accounts
Yes.
sa ating discipline sa history. We document them, we get as much as possible, especially right now na we might be in the last years of the remaining veterans.
Yes.
So kailangan yung mga stories nila ay kailangan nating i-record. But the problem with that, with oral histories kasi is maraming certain factors like the fading of memory. So kailangan i-verify or i-cross-check with multiple or other sources, etc. But it doesn't mean that oral histories are not valid in creating a story. You get them as snapshots of the situation. So kung kailangan mong mag-microscope sa macro view of World War II in the Philippines, they are valid. But the stories just form small portions of the overall history, yung collective history natin. So for the Scholars Day, kailangan talagang i-cross-check ito with documents, other stories, na kung ano pa yung meron sa ngayon. And ang patuloy na ginagawa ng mga younger historians like us, younger than the older generation, sinasama ko na kayo,
Like you.
ay syempre is to reinterpret them for the current generation and even for the future generations.
So,
Sorry, yes. The problem kasi sa atin, for example, in the
Mhm.
case of what John Ray is saying, is the fact that those who have you run into problems kasi, no? For example,
Mm-mm.
um, I've interviewed so many veterans, and then there's this thing that you observe. The very noisy ones tend to be a bit questionable.
Crazy.
Yeah, they're a bit questionable. The silent ones, where you have to prod them, they're the ones who have the more interesting stories to say,
Mm-mm.
to tell. Okay,
yeah.
uh,
Yes.
but the thing is that the country has dropped the ball so many times on them, that regarding them, that they've all started dying off already. Okay, so your database for presenting, for example, okay, a Philippine perspective of a certain historical event will be severely affected by the fact that um, since we are not a society that tends to write their memoirs, okay,
Mm-mm.
you will have very, very few accounts to deal with, okay, to work on. And then you're then inevitably get pulled towards those accounts and those official documents that exist in Western archives.
Yes.
Sila kasi nagtatabi, tayo hindi. No?
Mm-mm.
Takes us forever to digitize something. Takes us forever to photocopy something. I mean, and what have you, no? To make it readily accessible to the researching public. Okay. Um, and what I'm saying here is that, uh, therefore, when you try to write something, you're going to end up with data that tends to be skewered or skewed towards what is readily available. And since, like I said, we've dropped the ball so many times, we are in a race against time to preserve what's left, and that makes, for example, Des Benipayo's advocacy very important, no? Because
Yes.
she's the one who, um, one of the few, basically, in this country who practically are devoting their lives towards that particular aspect of preserving what is left in uh, our historical databases and consciousness of those who are alive or those who may have um, valuable documents. So from here, let's go towards this is advocacy. Okay,
Yes.
so this is the time that you will tell us the World War II Memorial Foundation, what it stands for. We already know why you because of combat and Rick Jason and your the
Tomorrow.
humanitarian aspect. We know why you wanted. But what was that thing that made you then set up the World War II Memorial Foundation? It's, and as foundations go, yours is a very young one. But from one that was very young, you know, and it's one of the very reputable ones. Okay,
Thank you.
but we're not going to go. So one of the reputable ones there,
Uh-huh.
and but very, very reputable ones. And in fact, from from it being a very young organization, it's very active now in publishing. You even I was watching the U.S. Embassy um, virtual commemoration this afternoon, and noontime, and yeah, you were there in the slideshow presentation.
I
In
was.
the Yeah, you were there. Oh, yeah, I have a
Oh.
copy of the picture. Yeah, nag fanboy mode ako eh.
Thank you.
So
Padala naman, friend.
yes. So ano to, and yung February conference natin. where I spoke also about the Battle of Manila. Nandun, you were there also. So that okay. So what made you jump into World War II Memorial Foundation? Yes,
I
this.
see. Yeah, so the interest was always there,
Yep.
even as a young girl nga. Maybe when we started this 2017, 2018, my kids were a little bit older na, no? So, pwede ko na silang pabayaan, hindi tutor. So, kami ng husband ko, my husband is also a World War II history enthusiast. And he's the grand nephew of Jose Abad Santos. So, this started it all, yung Jose Abad Santos. And we wanted, kasi we were helping this small production outfit do uh, produce documentaries on the guerrillas and such. So sabi ko sa husband ko, why not produce something on your on your lolo, 'di ba? Who's a
Yes.
supreme World War II hero. So that
Yes.
started my research. My research was not supposed to be a book. It was just for the documentary. But then I was able to get so much information. Nasabi ko, I owe it to the Filipino people to tell them about this wonderful person. That once upon a time, we had in our history someone who was, who had very high moral integrity, something you can be proud of. Anyway, so when we started this project, the book and the documentary, we decided to incorporate it into a foundation. First of all, honestly, so that we can get funding. But that never materialized. We used our own funds in the end. But then, it was like, we made it into a foundation para maging legit lahat. If we do get donations, like for sales of the book, we are a legit foundation, ganyan. Plus the fact that this can continue even if, let's say, may mangyari sa amin or what, patuloy siya, di ba? And then our advocacy in spreading World War II history would continue. So, nandyan ba yung ating AVP? Baka pwede
Yes
natin
po.
ipakita
Yes,
sa
there you
kanila.
go. Yes,
So, that's
yes.
the gist
Pwede
of
natin
our
i-play.
objectives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yan,
Ah,
prepare lang muna.
prepare natin.
So, may AVP
Okay,
kami.
John Ray?
Yeah, no, di ba?
Yung trailer po ba ng Honor?
No, I
Ay,
think this,
sige. Pakita na rin
yeah,
natin.
the trailer of the honor, and then there's the other one, the one that I sent, that yung kanina.
Yes. Okay.
About the foundation muna.
Yeah.
Yun.
That's a
Yes,
Facebook
we can
link,
show.
di ba?
Yes.
Yes. If you can show them that para, the people will find out more about us, what do we do. So yun nga sabi ni Jose, even though we're just 2.5 years old, marami na ring nagawa yung foundation. We've published books, made the documentary, we've had seminars and conferences. And syempre, favorite speaker ko yan si Jose.
Ready na. Ready na siya.
Okay.
Yan. Okay. Take it away.
Take it away.
Wala atang audio. John Ray, ang audio.
Ang audio. Hala? Ano?
Ulit.
Okay.
Rewind.
Okay. Technical difficulties.
As the Teletubbies would say, again!
Live show.
Kaya ni John Ray yan.
Oh.
Buti na lang may bata-bata tayo.
Oo nga eh.
Hindi ko kayang gawin.
Salamat sa mga millennials.
Mahirapan ako gawin yan.
Ako rin. I rely on my daughters to do my PowerPoint. Kamusta ka na, John Ray? Kaya ba? Anyway, sige.
Kayang-kaya po.
Naayos si John Ray. Ayun, so... And then probably sabi nga ni Jose kanina was yun, isa sa mga maayos na foundations because we are a stickler for historical accuracy also. Yan.
Ayan na.
Yan na.
Wala pa rin. While we're waiting, si Sito Maramba, here he has the... Oh, wait, we're going. Wala pa rin.
Wala pa rin.
Pero may subtitles naman, di ba?
May subtitles.
Ganda sana
Yan.
yung music eh.
Gusto mo kumanta ako habang ano to?
Actually, I have it in my laptop, but I don't know how to do it.
It's okay.
So that's part of the documentary that we did. That's Alex Medina playing the young Abad Santos. That's Dan and the rest of the gang.
There you go. That's Ricardo Cepeda.
Yeah,
And
and
that's Marina
Marina Benipayo.
Benipayo.
Yeah, that was James Scott during his book launch
Yes.
here. And this is yon National World War II Museum from New Orleans when they visited. We took them around.
Yun, relics na yan. Mapapasama ako dyan sa relic.
Oh. Sayang
There you
wala
go.
tayong audio. Anyway.
So,
One of the things na lagi ko sinasagot sa mga nagtatanong na bakit ituturo pa yung history na yan, nangyari na yan. Ang lagi kong sinasagot, palaging may taong pinapanganak, lumalaki, na hindi alam kung anong nangyari. Kaya kailangan, ginugunita, pinapaalala, para malaman ng susunod na generation. Kung sasabihin ng generation na ngayon na ito na ituro na yan wag na. Oh, patay. Ganun kasimple lang yon. And correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that I've learned is that tulad ng sinabi ni John Ray is that in the midst of history, yung mga iba't ibang perceptions, you cannot get one exact story of how World War II ended. Because, at least from my point of view, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is the survivor of Manila, there are those who stayed in the provinces, there are those who fought as guerrillas in Central Luzon. Their experience would be different from those in Cebu. May similarities pero may pagkakaiba. So, you cannot say definitively, this is World War II. They are all part of the tale of World War II, but each story is just like a chain to the entire story.
Yes.
Yun ang gustong kong maintindihan ng tao dahil sinasabi, hindi, itong lolo ko, ganito ginawa, ganyan ng World War II. Ang nasa isip ko, ibang kinuwento ng lolo ko Sino tama? Di ba?
Actually,
Sasabihin niya,
tama ka, Phil.
nagutom ako, pero nasa probinsya, hindi. So, one cannot say na yung experience ng isa, that is why I ask yung mga oral histories, magkakaiba Kailangan pagtugtugin. It's like a tapestry.
Yeah.
And
People
that has
fail
to be woven.
realize sometimes that it's a national experience. So they tend to
Yes.
say, sa Manila, ganyan. So that's, It's a
Oh,
national... yun nga, tama. Wala pang... I haven't seen a narrative that will tuhog everything, no?
So
Well,
maybe
it's-
you guys can do that.
I remember kasi the Veterans Federation of the Philippines kasi, and this was in the 1990s, they had a project sana that would have come up with a very comprehensive database on guerrilla interviews. Kasi I was part of that activity no?
Okay.
And we were interviewing one guerrilla after the other. Dami naming na-interview na. So and then sinasabit namin sa
Veterans
BFP yun.
Federation.
Sa
What
Veterans
happened?
Federation.
Where are
What happened?
Where are these interviews now? What happened?
Where are those interviews?
So
Wala na.
Jose, where are those interviews?
I don't know. Ano to? No, what happened kasi is that there were there were changes kasi in the building or whatever. I don't know. Parang
Sayang.
they got lost. So
Ow.
ganon.
You know when I need
So
some stuff like that, you know who I borrow from?
Rico.
Peter Parsons.
not Peter. Rico
Peter,
also has a
sarili
very
niya,
good.
nag-interview siya and he has, sayang nga because I'm supposed to digitize it for him. But,
Si Rico, I was giving him some of the copies of
sana
our
meron
interviews.
pa, no?
Oh, parang sayang kasi where's my Cavite interviews exactly which what Phil was talking about. The
Oral
I
histories.
interviewed two sets of Caviteños. One, those who lived in Cavite City, and then
Mm-hmm.
those who lived outside of Cavite City or Cavite Town at that time, which was called. Okay, and those who lived in the town of Cavite, in during the war, suffered hunger. Those who lived outside of the town were okay. I
Mm.
mean,
Yeah,
they would eat chicken. They would eat.
Yeah.
Their diet was complete. It was their only worry was the so-called tulisanes, yung mga
Yeah.
tulisan that you were talking about. Okay, and some of them would actually be guerrillas. Kaya yung mga na to, mga nagpapanggap na guerrillas. Some tulisans
Yes.
were actually nagpapanggap na guerrillas. So yun.
Ah,
And all those
bandido.
interviews just disappeared.
Wow,
sayang.
Wow.
sayang.
So,
So I
since
don't
you
know where they
mentioned
were.
since you mentioned yung mga tulisanes o yung mga guerrillas, I
Mhm.
was also reading the Filipino guerrilla archives na
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
maintained
Oh.
na digitized. One of their stories is that hindi, actually not stories. Those records are accounts of
Mhm.
guerrilla unit fighting a guerrilla unit over a watering hole.
A what?
Ganong kahirap.
Oh, what?
Uh,
Anong pinaglalab? Pinaglalab.
Dahil source ng tubig
Okay, yes,
sa
yes, yes. Okay.
bundok. Nag-away
Walang...
sila doon. It was very very hard to read yung account na yon, and it was in sa Quezon nangyari,
Yeah.
sa Tayabas area, yung ganong guerrilla unit fighting illegitimate guerrilla unit over watering holes, over parachuted supplies of anti-malaria drugs.
Mm.
Maraming mga bagay na ang hirap basahin eh, pero they have to be read.
So,
And
yeah.
mm,
So we see here the challenges. Okay, so that's what were your challenges in what were those challenges that you experienced, those unlucky moments that you experienced during this advocacy of yours? What are the challenges that,
yeah,
in terms of research, in terms of publications, in terms of awareness? What have you what are your experience?
First of all, I think funding.
Funding.
Di
Of
ba?
No,
course.
Yun yung
talking
spark
about
eh.
funding, talking about
Pag may,
funding, that's we know we are
ah,
actually doing this for free. This entire thing. This is all
yeah.
because for the love of freaking history. There.
For the
So
love of
and our
country.
yeah love of do we yes we love the Philippines. Yes.
duty, honor, country above self.
Jutay on our country. So yun and jutay corner. So yun. So this is ano to. And that's the nature of this job. It's very this type of advocacy. It's very you don't get money from this thing. It's
Yes,
practically it's something that you actually end up losing a lot of money.
exactly.
No.
In
There.
fact,
So
a lot of
continue.
Ay,
Yes.
people will come up to me, oh, I have a manuscript, ganyan, ganyan. If you can you publish it for us? Sabi ko, first of all, walang pera dito ha. Don't expect that you will earn from this book. Sabi ko, totoo naman eh. Di ba?
Mm.
Wala. So this is a welcome to the world of non-fiction
for the love
writing.
of,
For the
for
love
the
of
love
Fiction
of.
writing. So I guess yun, funding. Secondly, manpower din. Ang hirap humanap ng, I've been looking for a very good researcher. John Ray, baka may mabigay ka naman.
Oo.
Because of lack
Hanap
of
po tayo.
time. As you said, this is all free. We have jobs. This is just a, an advocacy of ours. So, ang hirap na, time is number one. Time ang isang problema. Ang dami kong naka-line up na research sa utak ko. Now, I have two na yun talaga yung pinapursue ko. But aside from that, ang dami that which I cannot do anymore because kulang na sa tao. So, yan yun isang challenge talaga. Somebody who's willing to work na nandun yung passion niya sa World War II. It's so hard. Lalo, di ba, niche to friend eh. Maraming researchers on the Spanish colonial period and all. Pero pag World War II, konti lang. So, yan yung isang
Yeah.
challenge dyan.
Which is kind of strange because actually World War II is the more recent one, so you expect researchers to be concentrated there because it's the easier one. Whereas whereas the Spanish period, dapat marunong ka magkastila pa eh.
Mag-Spanyol.
To research.
Actually, nag-joke nga ako when I screened our movie at the Manila Studies Association conference last year. Niloko ko sila, sabi ko dun sa mga historians, lumipat na kayo sa World War II because ang dami nyo na dyan.
Oo.
Spanish
Kasi, di ba, Spanish colonial,
niloko ko sila.
pero yun ang
But,
habla Espanyol, di ba? But there.
Oo. So at least now there's a growing interest, which I'm really, really happy with the free webinars that we have been giving.
Yes.
In fact, Intramuros is very happy that our World War II segments in the Intramuros learning sessions are doing very
well.
very good. Grabe yung numbers natin, yung views natin, 5,000, mga ganyan. So they're really happy. They're giving, parang ako nag-aasikaso ng content. I love doing it, but it's also draining, di ba, friend?
Yep.
Something that you love to do also drains you at the end of the day.
Yeah,
But
because-
I love doing it, and if this will mean more knowledge, lalo na in the part of our youth on our World War II history, yeah, okay na ako.
And as part of that, okay, one of the success stories that you have, would be that film that because you did the book, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you did a book. So where's that book that you did?
Chadan!
Chadang. And that book is about, of course, you mentioned about Jose Abad Santos, right?
Yes.
And then aside from the book, you also have related to the book, you also have a short movie, right? A short
Docu-film.
movie, a short docu-film of which we can show the trailer right now.
Yes. Sana may audio.
Yes.
Pwede kami
May audio na yun kasi galing siya sa YouTube.
Yay. Yes,
pwede kami
please.
mag-voice over.
Okay.
Yan.
So that's the book.
So it's a beautiful, beautiful docu-film.
Habang naglo-load siya, let's say hi to Walden Uy, who's my former student. Hello. Yes, it's like having History 101 all over again. Dan is saying about the medals. Yes, there you go. And then, yun. So yun, I think it's loading na.
Yes.
And Reindeer says, and there's the hooks. Yan.
Walang audio.
Ba't walang audio?
Wala po.
John Ray.
Wala.
Wala.
Yun.
Pwede rewind.
Rewind. Yan.
Yan. Okay, kaya pala.
You must show these people that you are brave. He was one of the greatest Filipinos, not just in World War II, but one of the greatest in the whole of Philippine history. Basahin mo talagang kwento ni Jose Abad.
With integrity. A man of character like Jose Abad Santos, given 30 years of public service, would stay true to his word.
He died as a hero under the most difficult period of Philippine history. He believed what he said. He stood by what he said. And rather than sacrifice his ideals and his honor, he chose to pay with his life.
Yung honor niya hindi nabalit. Talagang marangal siyang namatay, umarap sa kamatayan. Not even the Japanese army could break him.
The example of Abad Santos is still as current today as it was in 1941. Tragic as it was, what he lived for and eventually what he died for is something that we have to keep remembering. He died for selflessness. He died for maintaining integrity, and he chose honor above all.
There you go.
Parang naalala ko yung ano to, no? Parang it's a sad, na yun, no? Yung, did the Philippine judicial system ever recover after the death of Jose Abad Santos?
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Diba?
And out of the scope of this
Kasi
situation.
parang ano to eh, 'di ba, no? Parang when you look at him, 'di ba, there's a man of character. Supreme Court Justice, ayusan na to, 'di ba? With,
Yes,
Justice.
yes.
yeah, 'di ba? So and then Parang ngayon, we have all these problems in the judicial system and what have you, puro judicial reform and here and that. And here was a guy of the judicial system who, you know, he, ano to, he gave his life for his country.
And
No, he
before
could
he
have just,
became Associate Justice of the Supreme Court and
yes,
eventually Supreme Chief Justice, he was the Secretary of Justice for 3 terms. So
yes,
he worked
yes.
under 5 American Governors General, under Harrison Wood, Stimson, Davis, and Murphy, and then kay Quezon. So doon pa lang ang dami niyang in-institute na reforms in the judicial system. And in the not just that, pati sa penal colonies natin, ang dami ring kalokohan. You know, at that time, meron na rin yung lumalabas, hindi sila sa jail nagsistay. Meron na rin, and he sacked all the ano ba tawag dyan, wardens that yung mga
That were
corrupt
involved.
wardens. So the ills of the society the ills that we have now present na rin noon, but the fact is yung officers noon, officials noon had high integrity, kaya katulad ni Abad Santos, so he sacked all the wardens na loko-loko, and he implored his judges, as he was the Secretary of Justice, sabi niya sa mga judges at the time, they were called Judge of the Peace, I forgot the name, for courts of first
Justices of the
instance.
peace.
Yes, Justice of the
Okay.
Peace. Yes, yes. So, kung ngayon RTC, yun yung dati, Justice of the Peace. So, sabi niya, he implored his justices to not be afraid of the congressman kasi yun yung mga nangiipit sa kanila eh. But you yourself, you have to be clean and worthy of the bench, sabi niya. Diba? Saan ka makakahanap ng ganyan ngayon? Diba?
Well, at least may kilala kaming na advocate ng Second World War history na talagang does it selflessly, no, walang kinikita. 'Di ba? Des? Yun. So meron pang natitira.
Abonado pa.
Abonado pa. So hintayin mo na lang na ma-execute ka. Yun ang naman kasi nangyayari sa bagad yan eh. Sa huli na
You
execute
know what?
eh.
Speaking of execution, when I was reading yung manuscript ng Makapili and lahat ng kalokohan, no? Imagine after the war, when Congress sat down in 1945, mga July ata, nag-convene na sila, di ba, friend? July 45. You know, one of the first acts that they passed was to release their back pay from 41 to 45 for
What?
services not even rendered. And the treasury was bleeding. Saan tayo ko? Mga tarantado. Sorry pero mga tarantado, di ba? So sabi ko siguro kaya na rin kinuha ni Lord si Abad Santos. Di niya kakayanin. You know,
Okay.
ginagawa yun. Di niya kakayanin. Grabe. Baka magkaroon siya ng maraming kaaway.
Okay. May dadagdag ako dyan sa ano doon because binasa ko yung records ng Philippine delegation to get the Japanese reparations. And if you look at the names kung sino-sino ng mga nandun, ang mga yung reparations were geared to restore businesses, to restore yung
Oligarchs.
Pero
Oligarchs.
hindi ko na sinasabi yun, okay? Pero yung mga ordinary Filipinos, nasan? Yung mga bahay na wala, nada. It's all geared into businesses. Look at the names kung sino mga nandun. And they represented all the major businesses that are still in existence now.
Yeah. You know, when I was researching on the immediate post-war years, and then the rehabilitation aid, until 56 when the Japanese finally agreed to give, hindi naman substantial yung amount, no? Pero I was an emotional wreck reading about it. And that could have been, you know, a rebirth, diba? Start of something new, diba? Wala eh. Sabi ko, are we to blame the Americans? Are we to blame the Japanese? Eventually,
I will just describe it as missed opportunities. Because look at one of the legacies of World War II, the comfort women. Inuna yung businesses and yung peace treaty natin, unfortunately, may clause doon na kung anong binayad na ng Japanese government sa reparations, wala na, sarado na, tapos na. So when we opened up my attempt to get reparations for the comfort women, which are ordinary Filipinos, hindi pwede because of what the Philippine government signed. So that's one of the reasons why when umabot sa Supreme Court ng Pilipinas na kailangan ganon, sinabi nila, we had a signed document. We cannot ask for more.
Sucks.
So, sarado.
Sucks.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's
The
one of the things that I
reparation,
learned. I wrote about it for I wrote a series of articles doon several years ago about that, and it was really hard to look at it. I found the documents doon sa libro na nilabas sa Ateneo and UP, and kaya nga it's not on the internet, it's in the libraries. It's in the libraries.
and in fact, the reparation money they gave was not really cash. Ang liit lang nung cash dun, 20 million lang. Of the
Yes.
400 million, that it was equipment, even manpower nila when they salvaged the ships in the Manila Bay and some other ocean natin. Parang yun na yung payment. Yun na yung payment nila.
Yeah, and sinabi mo equipment is to replace factory equipment, yung mga gagamitin para sa mga factories natin mga ganun. Pero yung the ordinary Filipinos
Yeah.
really did not benefit from it.
Didn't trickle
So
down, yes.
yes, the trickle down was not there,
Wala.
was not really there. And that's why I describe that period of history as a missed opportunity. And the reparations ended
76.
1976.
time ni Marcos
Okay.
na.
Oh,
20-year period.
okay.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I think I still haven't yet really proven, but I think when those stuff that was coming in from abroad were uh, supporting our economy, or at least our businesses, and that dried up, kailangan nilang magpasok ulit na isang sistema to replace that. So, maybe it might be a stretch. Kaya in-espouse yung OFW program. We need money coming in from abroad. The businesses did not really export stuff.
Yes.
We were importing stuff. So, nung nawala yung reparations, saan tayo kumikita?
Yeah.
Something else propped up our economy. And
There's no
yun ang
production.
thesis ko.
Walang, yeah.
So-
Yun ang thesis ko that I still haven't been able to
So
check.
basically, that just like practically validates, gives us the reason why we really have to study history, diba?
Yes.
So that is what fuels this advocacy that, for example, Des has, because we have to figure out what lessons that we can learn, okay, that can be useful in fixing whatever needs to be fixed in this country that we have. Like for example, what ails this country? Why do we miss out on opportunities? Is it because of a damaged culture, as what follows? It follows was saying that the damaged culture of this country, like for example, the lack of a sense of nationalism, and that's why again. That's the value of history. That's the value of what Desiree does. I mean, so when you wrote that book on because this is the first time you've written a book, Des.
Yes, yes.
And
Food
how did
science
it
nga ako,
feel
friend,
like
eh.
when you wrote that book?
Yes.
How did
First time.
yes? And when you said that you when you were reading some references, you would feel these emotions with you. So when you were writing about Jose Abad Santos, what were you feeling?
Alam mo, it's funny now that I think of it, pero when I was doing it, I was dreaming about him. Sobra akong obsessed, no? Parang I can even imagine his voice.
Mm-mm.
I was very passionate about everything kasi, yun nga, I really saw what a great man he was. Na-imagine ko siya naglalakad. Ganyan, to that extent, na-imagine ko siya nagsasalita. Ganyan. And, ano nga isang question, friend? Nawala ako. Mahina yung audio.
So what Yeah, exactly. You already answered it because I was asking you what was going on in you. How did you what did you feel when you were writing it? So you put yourself into the character, and was it an inspiring thing? What because you did finish it, okay? And that
Yes.
book has it won it has won
Yes,
awards.
it
There you go.
won. So, very happy that the rookie author won, no? And yun na, World War II story pa.
Mm.
Kaya,
A rookie
oo.
author who specialized in food.
Yeah. Who taught food science in UP?
Yes.
I taught for 2 years, but food science, nothing to do with history. I
Yeah.
guess if you really pursue your passion, no? Maybe
Yes.
I'm one example of that. If you really pursue your passion, yeah, yun, it's, at the end of the day, it's, ano ba nagawa mo and,
Ano ba
diba,
ambag
what's your
mo? Yeah.
contribution?
Yes. And
Oh.
and and with that, no, kung ano ang ambag natin. So, ano bang ambag natin? Lahat ito ambag natin ngayon, 'di ba? So, on that note, we would conclude. For example, we would conclude this particular episode on the commemoration of the Second World War, and of course, in discussing the advocacy of deaths here. And before we end and before we say our goodbyes, I would like to ask Desiree, would you want? Do you have any I would not say last words. It's so hard to say. Do you have any last words to say? No, but do you have any message to impart to our audience from I mean, think of this as your call to an advocacy, or at the same time, um, well, if you want to plug something also,
Ayun,
this is it.
siguro plug,
Mm-mm.
this Saturday, don't forget, 8 p.m. Sa Intramuros Administration website, you can register for the Zoom link. We'll be having a webinar on MacArthur. So, time to find out more about him. He's one of the most misunderstood characters in our history. Diba, no? The
Yes.
title is Sifting Through the Myths of General Douglas MacArthur. So we'll sift through all the myths and the fallacies and the facts about him. And my special guests here is, of course, Dr. Ricardo Jose of the UP Department of History,
Yes.
our foremost World War II historian, mentors namin ni Custodio yan.
Yes.
And James Zobel, he's the director and archivist of the MacArthur Memorial Library and Museum in Norfolk, Virginia. So please catch this. Mahirapan na tayo ulit invite si James. So, yon, that will be this Saturday, 8 p.m. It will be on Facebook Live, but you can register for the Zoom link if you wish to. And for those interested, you can buy our books, you can message us. Every purchase you do will help us spread World War II history to the public schools. We bring our films there, we screen for free. And in the process, we instill in the young, in our youth, the love for country. Diba no, friend?
Yes.
Custodio, the love
Yes.
for
Love
country.
of country. The
Love of
selfless
country.
love of country. My God.
Country
And
above self.
sana ma-emulate nila yung values and virtues
Pamela.
ng
There you
ating
go.
mga heroes. Ayan, those are the books for sale. Oh, we're also selling Dr. Legarda's Occupation. I miss him so much.
Yes. He
You've
passed
heard
away just.
about him passing away. He's
Yes.
my mentor,
Yes.
and a
I,
friend and a colleague. There. And it's a very good book. It was, kasi siya na lang naman yung buhay na talagang nagsulat.
Yes.
You know, I'm gonna ask you nga kanina but I know we're running out of time. When you
Ano?
said our society was not a writing society, yung we don't write our memoirs. So, tama pala yung ano ko. Tama pala yung thinking ko na gano'n. Bakit nga walang mga memoirs despite the
Di
fact
ba?
that,
Nasunog kasi yung archive eh.
yun
Well,
lang
kasi
ba? Is that
Hindi
the
kasi
only
talagang
reason?
ano to eh. Talagang we don't tend to unlike the Americans, they will really write
Yes,
down.
oo.
They will record everything. I mean from Vietnam War, World War II, you will see personal accounts of that
Yes.
battle, of the
Sa atin,
battle. So
kulang.
tayo wala. It's like
Yes.
none. It's you mabibilang mo sa isang kamay lang yung I mean for example, do we have a memoir of the Korean War? Brought by a
Wala.
Korean
Wala, no?
War veteran. Is
Meron
there a
ba?
memoir out there? Wala.
Wala, no? Pep talk. Yeah. That's
Meron
why
ba?
the
Sandali.
people also don't know because there's no available literature, di ba?
Very
In
few,
fact,
very rare.
may lumapit nga sa akin, friend, sabi, bakit ganun, Miss Des? Yun mga books, puro na lang about the Americans, yung sa Los Baños, about the Americans, ganyan, ganyan.
Kasi sila nagsusulat.
Yun nga, sabi ko, sumulat tayo. Sumulat tayo. Hindi nila kasalanan na, yun yung narrative nila because that's their side.
Kasi,
So,
but
what do we do? Sumulat tayo.
ironically, we used to have a writing society. Kasi I remember that in the 50s and the 60s, there were books coming out in the Philippines. But at a certain point, nawala yung kulturang yun, no? So while you found what you're looking for, Phil, before I wrap
Yes,
up?
you mentioned about Korean War. Itong binigay ni Rino. I
Yes.
wish to have this book restored.
Yeah, but that's not a memoir, right? That's the
Yeah, it's not a
that's not
record,
the
it's the
memoir.
official record, official
Yes.
military record
On the
of
10th BCT.
the 10th Battalion Combat Team.
Yes.
Wow.
And with ang hirap pong galawin because it's falling apart.
Ayun. So we will discuss that in our next and our next actually episode is going to be on the Korean War because we have ano ba? 60th pa?
19
60th, no?
More than
70th.
that.
Ano,
More
50.
than
Wait. 50, 70, the 70th,
70 na.
70th, the 70th anniversary, 70th anniversary of the Korean War. So once again, thank you again, Des, for gracing our show and inspiring us with your selfless advocacy work. And rest assured, that this motley group, this motley crew of people in this in this little association we have will always be at your beck and call if you need us for everything, for
Thank
anything,
you.
Definitely.
So
Thank
there,
you.
so we will assist you, and we say that in front of the audience here. And one last message: Toim Leon Imao says, "Thanks for the late night talk, guys. Best viewed with a few shots of chilled soju for a nightcap. Salud." And
Bantay.
with that, I end our show. Thank you very much for watching, and all of you stay safe in this very interesting times that we are all living in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.